Are we in? Yes, we are. Yay! Okay, let me just get set up and figure all this stuff out, and then we'll be good to go. So bear with for a few minutes. Simon Town is now live. Okay, so I'm just going to wait for people to arrive and get organised. Bear with me. Oh, hi, Kirby Brewer. So if you see me keep looking down, it's because I have my phone here, so I'm trying to look at messages as well as share on the screen. So, oh, hey Stacey. So just to check, can you hear me okay? Yeah, no, can we hear all right? I think there's maybe a bit of a delay. Frankie? Yes, can hear fine. Fantastic, Vicky Chapman. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just give it the last couple of minutes and then I'll jump right in to the presentation. Ooh, doing things in the mirror is weird, isn't it? Can hear you fine, hon. Thank you. Okay. Guys, it's like the first time I've worn makeup in a couple of weeks. This is a super exciting day for everybody. Hi, evening. Okay, awesome. So, really excited to be doing this, guys. I can't even tell you how much. Actually, those of you who know me probably will know how much. So basically, I spent like the whole day getting this ready, obviously going through like prepping loads of really geeky information. And that's like my favorite thing to talk about is the science and the why behind all of the things we do. So where I spent so much time getting it ready, and I live with two non-hairdressers, and I'm like, bursting to talk about this information with someone. So genuinely really excited that it's now 7 o'clock and we can do it. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking to you about all things Bleach and specifically how to get more lift. So why did I want to focus on Bleach? Well, for a few reasons. I guess firstly, because, and tell me if your experience is different to this, but when I trained and obviously did NVQ, it wasn't really something that was focused on too much. There was a lot of focus on highlighting, tinting, perming and chemical straightening, but there wasn't really much of a focus on bleaching. So it was something that I felt like there was quite a lot of a grey area around, like there was information missing perhaps. And then subsequently, when I went to do my qualifying, like my exams, which was called the Vardering process, I trained with Tony and Guy when I first trained as a hairdresser. So after, I fast-tracked, I think it was after about 18 months training, I went to the Tony and Guy Academy. I travelled there every day for 6 weeks from Maidstone, which is my hometown, and I had to do like a series of trainings and exams. So one of them was scalp bleaching, and excuse me, the scalp bleach model that I did for my exam was the first time I'd ever done it, and as you can imagine, that was terrifying. So I'd done it on a doll's head. I could talk the talk, but could I walk the walk? Excuse my French. So I did it anyway, and actually it was okay. The application was all right, thank goodness. But when it came to the toning, I was using L'Oreal, which I often still do now, and I was using a range called Luo. Has anyone used Luo Colour before? So Luo, they have some amazing toners. It's like PO, the PO range, pastel range. PO, which is like a neutral, PO1, which is like a blue ash, like a grey kind of colour, and PO2, which is like a lilac, like a mauve ash. Sorry, you keep seeing me looking down again. It's because I'm just trying to read your comments at the same time. So anyway, I went in with a PO2, which is like a mauve ash, and I popped it on. You know, it's obviously lifted to like 50 shades of yellow. I'm like, need to get rid of this. So I put on my PO2, and it goes like a dark purple, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, get it off. So rinsed it off in a massive panic, and lo and behold, it's still bright bloody yellow underneath. I'm like, what on earth is going on? So look, it wasn't a total end of the world. Obviously, I put it back on for some time and eventually got it to the desired colour. Somehow as well, I actually passed, but there we go, one of life's mysteries. Put it back on, got it the right colour, but I guess I learned a lot of things from that experience, but I guess the main thing I learned was that I really didn't know what I was doing in that area. And although I had been taught and I knew how to apply the toner in theory, I didn't really understand what was happening or why these things were happening. And I just kind of vowed to myself a little bit that day that I need to find out more. I need to find out as much about this as possible, and with an emphasis on the why, the reasons behind why these things happen. So, and that's kind of who I am still today. Like, I'm very much a why child. Sometimes I think I might be a bit of a nightmare to educate, because I'm that student that's always questioning, but why? And I know that can be very annoying to some educators, so I'm so sorry if I've been that student for you before. However, as an educator now, I hope that makes me a little more patient, and I actually love it when I get tons of questions, even if you feel like it's a difficult question or it's, oh God, people go, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Actually, I disagree. Sometimes I think there is. But no, but you know what? Like, if you don't know it, it's because I haven't told you, or somebody else hasn't told you. So anyway, that's my reason for choosing Bleach. Also, I think it's probably the most asked for service these days, and I don't mean specifically scalp bleach, but lightening in general. So what I'm going to talk about today, some of it will be a little bit about scalp bleaching, but it's actually all relevant to regardless what technique, what service you're using, if that makes sense. It's just the lightening process that I'm kind of referring to. Just in a question, sorry, a bit late. What is PO2, please? No worries, never too late. PO2 is a toner, a very, very light level toner, like a 10 level, which has a soft mauve tone. When you apply it, it looks like it's dropping and it's going quite scary quite quickly. But actually, you rinse it off and it hasn't done enough. You need to leave it on for a little bit longer than what you think. Anyway, we'll come on to toning just shortly. In fact, I love your accent. Lol, really? Thanks, Joanne Embley. Okay, so I'm going to exit my bedroom now and switch over to a screen share to take you through a little presentation that I've done. So hopefully you'll still be able to hear me. Bear with, hopefully you won't have too many technical hitches. Application, Bleach explained, share, play. Okay, so tell me guys, can you see the full screen? There's going to be a bit of a delay here while I wait for your answers to come through. Hopefully you can. Let me know if you can see the full screen, and it should say Bleach explained. Yes. Fantastic. Okay, great news. Yes, they've all good. Thanks, Shazza. Okay, awesome. So, I think a really good place to start with this would be, what is bleach? And following on from there, how does it work? So, what is it? Well, first of all, it's two main elements. The first element is the powder itself. It's usually a powder, and that is salts predominantly. So the purpose of the salts they're really there to kind of exfoliate and to open up the cuticle. Is kind of their main purpose. Now, I'm not saying they're pure salt. It's not gonna it's not gonna be the same as getting your regular table salt and popping it on your hair. But effectively, the purpose of that part of it is to exfoliate, open up the cuticle to allow part two to get in, which is the oxidant or the oxygen. Okay. Now we have different levels. We have different strengths of oxidant that we can use. Usually they're around kind of a 20, 30, 40 volt. Obviously, we can have weaker as well. We don't have stronger these days. And the clue is in the name with the oxidant. So the only thing that actually lightens hair naturally is oxygen. Now, people often say, like I used to ask that question a lot when I'd be teaching, you know, for L'Oreal or whatever, like, what's the thing that lightens the hair naturally? Everyone go, the sun. And actually the sun doesn't lighten the hair. What lightens the hair is oxygen. But the sun is like a massive rollerball in the sky. It's a big heat source, right? So it just accelerates that lightening process. But what actually lightens is the oxygen. Now, oxidant or developer or peroxide, however you want to call it, is basically, amongst other things, a high amount of oxygen. Also, just to check, by the way, can you still see me or can you only see my screen? I'm not sure if you can still see me or not. I mean, it doesn't matter. I'll just try not to, I don't know, just be aware of what I'm doing, I suppose. Okay, so anyway, back to this. So the oxidant, as I said, it comes into only the screen. Okay, good to know, John Anthony, thank you. So the oxidant, as I said, comes in different strengths. So typically speaking, if you have a 20 volume, that's 20 times the normal volume of oxygen that you'd have present. Okay, 30 volume, 30 times the normal volume of oxygen that you'd have present. Does that make sense? Yeah, so the higher the number, the stronger it is, but that's kind of one of the big reasons why. Now, what the oxidant's purpose is, or the peroxide or whatever, the oxygen's purpose is to lighten the hair. Okay, so the salts, the exfoliant, they're there to open the cuticle to allow for the peroxide to get in to be able to lighten the hair. Okay, now how it lightens the hair is by removing the pigments. Okay, as you can see on this picture on the right here. Dodgy picture that I drew up. So if you imagine your hair to be like a brick wall, okay, the hair structure itself is the brick wall. The pigments in it are the bricks in the wall. Okay, now that brick wall is in front of a window. Okay, you can't see any sunlight coming in because there's a brick wall in the way. Everything looks dark. When you start removing the bricks, the sunlight starts to come through the window and everything looks lighter. Okay, no, you can't see anything. You shouldn't. It's not actually happening. Don't worry. I'm just talking about it happening. Imagine you remove those bricks from the brick wall, the light can shine through and everything looks lighter. Okay, it's the same with your hair. Your pigments are like those bricks. So if the oxygen there is when bleach basically kicks the bricks out of the wall, okay, so that light can get through, so that it can shine through and the hair looks lighter. Does that make sense? Now, just in case it doesn't, me and my lovely housemates, I roped them into preparing some videos with me earlier where we didn't have a brick wall that we could callously kick bricks out of. However, we've improvised with some paper and some sticks. So I'm going to play you a video now. So just to kind of introduce you to this a little bit so you don't think what on earth is going on. The white piece of paper here, imagine this is your hair, okay? And you're going to see the effect that bleach has, okay? It's basically making holes in the structure of your hair by removing the pigments for the light to shine through. Let's have a look. Demonstration number one, the piece of paper held is the hair. This stick is the bleach. We're going to be making holes in a piece of paper in the same way that bleach would make holes in the hair. Here we go. As you can see, the hair paper is damaged, holes have appeared in the hair/paper, and light is able to reflect through it, making the hair/paper blonde. So there you go. Imagine again, that piece of paper is the hair. In order to make it look light, we need to remove the pigments, okay, so that the light can shine through the hair and therefore will appear lighter. Blonde hair, like blonde isn't actually a colour, okay, it's the light being able to pass through the hair, okay, so in order for that to happen, you have to remove what is blocking that light, which is the natural pigments, okay. In doing so, thanks Ben Reynolds, in doing so, that does, however, also create gaps in the hair. See, it literally creates holes. Therefore, it makes the structure of the hair weaker. Now, the next video that we created, I'm glad you like it, guys. I wasn't sure which way this was going to go. I was like, you know what? They'll either love it or they'll just think I'm absolutely crazy. But either way, let's hope it's memorable, which is kind of my go-to in life. So the next one, we're looking at using a thick piece of card, basically, which also, luckily enough, I had in a dark colour. So this would be an example of, for maybe like a darker hair type. So one of my housemates is Chinese heritage. Her hair is incredible, but like each strand of her hair is like 10 times the thickness of one of my strands, right? So it's thicker, it's darker. Let's have a look at what happens when we try to lighten that kind of hair. Now we're going to look at darker hair types. They're darker in colour, stronger in material, so I've got a dark piece of card. We're going to try the same bleach, see what it does. Doesn't work because the hair is too strong, so we're going to go for a stronger bleach. Works, as you can see, harder to do, but look how much light you see coming through, so now the hair is lighter. Sorry, it just makes me laugh watching it back. So, as you can see, darker hair, harder to lift. We stabbed it with the same stabby stick that we used for the lighter base, in inverted commas, and it didn't lift because it was thicker, right? Darker, stronger. So we had to use something stronger, which was, in this case, a biro. But let's say a stronger peroxide or a stronger product. So in that case, it finally lifted, but what we learned that it was much harder to do. Now, what we learned from that in general was to get hair blonde, we have to make holes in it. Okay, we have to remove the pigments in order for light to be able to pass, to shine through the hair, which gives it the illusion of being blonde, makes it look lighter, makes a lot more sense. I'm glad to hear that, Sasha. To allow light to shine through so it appears lighter. So the more holes, the more light can get through, the lighter it looks. So guys, I ask you one question. Is it possible to have healthy white blonde hair? What do we think? Is it possible to have healthy white blonde hair? I'm probably going to upset some manufacturers by this, but I'm afraid to say that no, there is, thank you Alfie, there is no such thing as healthy platinum blonde hair. Hence the unicorn. So, cosmetically, okay, because you know you'll see all sorts of things online with this white blonde hair, and it looks super shiny and super healthy, and you're like, well, that's healthy, right? Okay, so cosmetically, it can appear healthy, but structurally, internally, it is not. Okay, so what's the difference between cosmetically and structurally? Structurally is very hard to say for a start. Cosmetically, for a start, cosmetically is like the cosmetic benefits. It's not an answer. How can I explain it? I guess like the false benefits, like the external benefits, would be a fair way of saying it. So, okay, I'm going to give you some examples. So I'm struggling to explain definition. Some examples would be like shine. So, you know, a lot of companies would use silicone or silicone derivatives to coat the hair. to give it a shine, which, by the way, always gets a bad rep, and it's, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's not horrific, actually. How it looks cosmetically. Yeah, fair. Superficial benefits. Yes, Vicky Chapman, superficial benefits. Love that. Okay, cosmetically. So how soft it might feel or how shiny it might look. Okay, it's kind of a bit of an illusion, sometimes, these cosmetic benefits, whereas structurally is like the actual internal structure. So imagine like the scaffolding of the hair. Now, so the reason there's no such thing as healthy platinum blonde hair is because it can't be structurally strong, because, as we just discovered, in order to get it blonde, the hair has to have holes in it. Yeah, lots and lots of holes in it to get it really light blonde, so that light can pass through it and it can appear blonde. Okay, thank you, Simon Townley. I'm really glad you like it. So the only way, just to contradict that, the only way that you could have healthy platinum blonde hair, two that I can think of, and if you can think of more, then please shout these out as well, because love sharing everything between us. So it could be hair that's 100% white, like hair that doesn't have any pigment, not because it's been bleached that way, but because it doesn't have any pigment, because it's stopped producing pigment. Yeah, white hair, when our hair loses its colour. Oh, which I started finding my first few since the end of last year. Anyway, the other thing could be, well, for the same reason, if it doesn't contain any pigment, but maybe not because of the aging process, maybe because you're albino. You don't. Well, technically, because you don't contain one of the enzymes that's needed to create pigment in your hair in the first place. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. All photoshopped images are a nightmare. Agree. Okay, so which brings me on to a little bit talking about bond builders, talking about the structure of the hair, and I'm going to talk about that just shortly. So first of all, let's talk about what are the things that affect lift. One of the first things that affects lift will be the product that you use. Okay, so let's talk about the different products we can use. We can use bleaching powders, we can use clay bleaches, or sometimes they'll be like creams and pastes. Let's start with powders first of all. Powders bleach powders tend to come in blue or a white formula. I'm so sorry, excuse me. So typically speaking, and I found this out relatively recently, like maybe the last year or two. I'd find new stuff out all the time. Do you know why? Because I just Google the shit out of everything. Sorry, I'm swearing again. Again, I ask a lot of questions, and subsequently people ask me a lot of questions, and if I don't know the answer, then I go and look it up. I'm desperate to find the answer. So this is one that I found out more recently. So talking about having different powders, blue and white, the reason a lot of the time that the powders are blue, not surprisingly, maybe surprising to some people, is because they can have neutralising benefits. So obviously when we lighten hair, we generally want to use like blue and purple to neutralise out any orange or yellow tones. So they make the powders with a blue tone to help to neutralise. Now, how much that actually does, honestly, I don't know. Like, some manufacturers do claim that it does have an effect. So, like, it helps lightening because it combats yellow tones. I wonder how true that is, and I guess if they claim it, there has to be some proof to it. But also, I wonder whether it's a bit of a psychological thing for us as well. That if it's blue, it's going to help to neutralise more. Does it or not? Not sure, but there we go. Who knows? Anyway, so there's the two different types, blue or white. Potentially they make a bit of a difference, but that's generally the reason that there is a blue one there, to make you at least think that there's some neutralising. Then you have the clay bleaches. So clay bleaches tend to be a lot weaker in lift, a lot more. I don't like the word weak actually, because it feels quite negative, doesn't it? They tend to be a lot more gentle. Let's say. But Lynn Webster, good point from there. I'm going to come on to that in just a minute. So clay bleaches tend to be a lot more gentle in their lift. The reason for that, to my knowledge or in my explanation, would be if you think about the sort of techniques you're using them for, that you're using them for a traditional balayage, traditional freehand balayage. And when you do traditional freehand balayage, you're generally painting like big chunky sections, right? One of the biggest things when we talk about balayage, I think one of the things that we hear a lot, we talk amongst ourselves a lot, is like, oh, it's really hard to get lift when it's freehand, right? And isn't that a nightmare? But think about it, if you're taking big chunky sections and then you get a lot of lift, I mean, it's not going to look great, is it? Arguably, because, you know, traditional freehand is big, thick sections, but it's low contrast, it's low lift. Whereas if you have big chunky sections and also big chunky lift, you have just got big chunky stripes. Does that make sense? So I think, in my experience, that would be my kind of thinking behind why freehand, like clay bleaches, tend to be more gentle in lift, because actually the desired effect is generally less contrast. I hope that helps. I'm just reading this message here from Joe Fern. So I recently went on a course with a well-known American artist. His lightning techniques were amazing. He changed my perception as I was skeptical. Now I'm a little confused again. Does this refer to traditionally lifting hair or lightening hair overall? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Joe Ferns Ashton, but please drop me a little message and we can try and figure it out a little bit more. Okay, so product-wise, then we also have creams and pastes. Okay, so we have lots and lots of different types of products. Creams and pastes, in my experience, don't give you really more lift than a traditional powder would, but they tend to have more conditioning ingredients built in. For that reason, they tend to be a little bit more expensive as well. But I like to think of them as I always think of these like, you know, when you get your waxing done, right? So girls, boys, I don't know when I was doing it at the moment, but let's say you go get your waxing done and you choose between strip wax or hot wax, you know, brand like Lycon, something like that, okay? They both get you to the same destination, yeah? By the end of it, the hair is removed, but the journey is very different, okay? So the more expensive option is a bit more of a pleasant journey, okay? Maybe it's a bit more comfortable, whatever. It's a little bit like that if you have more of a luxury bleach, like a cream or a paste bleach, as opposed to a traditional powder bleach. They both do the same thing, yeah? They both get you blonde, hopefully. They both lighten your hair. But the way they do it is sometimes a little bit different. So one maybe has more kind of conditioning ingredients or elements like that. I hope that makes sense. Excuse me while I pause for a sip of water. Okay, fab. I got deceived with the blue because it always makes it look less yellow when you test it. Agreed, Claire Jones. I'm so glad you said that because that's another thing I wanted to talk about shortly. So, some other things that can affect lift, and some other things that can affect lift, excuse me. First up then is mixing ratio. So, your mixing ratio, this is going to be different depending on which manufacturer, which brand of product you use. So, always refer back to manufacturer's guidelines. One of my closest friends works in product development and testing, and it's a real bugbear of his when people break the rules, don't measure their bleach. You know, he always says, like, those guidelines are there for a reason because we spent bloody months and months and sometimes years testing at what gets the best results, and that was it. I'm like, you know what? Fair enough. So I would generally recommend follow your manufacturer's guidelines when it comes to mixing ratio. But again, it's important to think about what the ifs and buts, like the whys behind that. Okay, so if you're mixing thicker, then potentially it's easier to get a more precise application, which could mean less overlapping, which could mean that you can leave it on for a bit longer, which could mean that you get more lift. Yeah, does that make sense? It's a lot of coulds and ifs and buts, but you know, let's explore as much as possible. If you mix it runnier, then you can spread it out a bit further, okay? So who's in charge of your budgets and your stock will love you for that potentially. But also you could get a little bit more overlapping, could be a problem. Honestly, if you, generally speaking, like some people say when I mix it thicker, I get more lift. I was having this conversation with the good friend I just mentioned who works in product development and testing for a well-known brand. And we were discussing the fact that what those two parts do. Okay, so what the granules or the powder, or whatever, does, as we mentioned, is predominantly salts, there to exfoliate, open the hair cuticle, and the peroxide, the oxidant, which the oxygen, as we said, is what lightens the hair. Okay, so actually, if you're going too thick and you're not using enough peroxide, potentially you could get less lift. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, next up, Lynn Webster. Do you find bond builders can hinder development slightly, even though they say they don't? I'm so glad you asked, because I have that literally next to my list as well. So let's all talk about that in just a second. Thank you. Mixing technique. Okay, this is one of my faves. So the way that you actually mix your product can have an effect on the strength of it, so namely how long it lasts and the power in the product. So you need to think about, when you mix the product, like physically stir it in my opinion, actually, it doesn't really matter if you use a brush or a whisk. I don't mean what you use is the problem, it's like the action of how you do it. So for all you bakers out there, you MasterChef lovers, you want to be folding it in like butter, not beating it like an egg. Just getting my Mary Berry on over here, okay? So the reason behind that, and the reason I stress that so much, to fold it like butter and not beat it, don't whisk it furiously like an egg, is because remember, what you're already mixing into the product is oxygen, oxidant, and that develops, okay? That oxidizes, that processes over time. It's most active, like it's most powerful, for around the first 20 to 30 minutes, depending on your product. So if you beat it, like an egg, mix it really, really quickly, you're beating in more oxygen, it's going to develop more quickly and lose power. Okay, so, and you'll see that physically when, have you ever, some bleaches that you use, or depending, it could be the same bleach, like, but someone else has mixed it up for you or whatever. Sometimes it will last quite well in the bowl for, say, like 20-30 minutes, and other times after 10 minutes it's completely like foamed up, or swollen, or started to like flake much more quickly than it did last time. And that's often to do with either not measuring it correctly, or the actual mixing technique. Okay, so beating it like too vigorously. Remember, fold it like butter. Okay. Excuse me. The next thing then is the peroxide. So, you know, I wanted to just have this conversation with you guys, because this is something that I think is a really, really good debate to have. Low and slow is the way to go. What do we think about that? What are your thoughts? Do you think that low and slow, so using a lower developer and leaving it on for longer, do you think that's better? Do you think it gets more lift? What are your thoughts on that? 100% for Michael Convey. A fan of low and slow. Possible to talk about okay, it does actually work, low and slow. Okay, so everyone's a fan of low and slow. Interesting. Now, I'm not about to contradict you, by the way, it wasn't a setup at all. One thing that I always say as well, and that I very much stand by, is I try to avoid saying yes or no to anything, not to get out of anything. I'm not afraid of that, but because I don't think there's always like a wrong or a right answer. I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes there's a wrong one. I'm sure you'll experience that. But for me, it's more important to understand the reasons behind the different options, and then to make the choice that best suits our situation, us and our client's situation. Okay. So is low and slow the way to go? Well, okay, think about it. So if you're using a lower peroxide versus a stronger one, We all saw what happened on the paper test, yeah, to show the different hair types. Sometimes, using a stronger peroxide does get you more lift. It is a stronger product. However, sometimes more damage is caused or can be caused by using a stronger product. If there's more damage occurring, you have to wash it off, whatever level it's lifted to. So potentially using a lower product and developing it more gradually could be less damaging, which could mean that you could get a bit more lift over time. Yeah, does that make sense? So I really don't think that there is a wrong or right answer for the old low and slow is the way to go debate. But I would just share with you that very rarely do I use anything stronger than 20 volt. Depending, like if I'm working on a very different hair type. So I was in a situation where I was doing a lot of Asian hair recently, like very dark bases, and I switched that up to 30 volt a lot. Still didn't go for anything stronger than that, and I managed to get lift from a 2 to a 9, a 10 in places. But that was it was a very strong hair type, so we were able to push it. I think a lot of the time we're tempted to reach for something really strong because we want to get lift within a time frame, and I think that's more unfortunately sometimes what we have to make decisions on is, do we have the time? And that shouldn't really be the reason behind what we choose, but sometimes it is. I would say the majority of the time you can get the lift using a lower developer, but you just have to be patient. Okay, finally then, bond builders. So bond builders also can affect lift. Now, I won't speak for bond builders in general because obviously there's so many different types. I've worked with a few now, not that many to be honest with you, maybe 3 different ones over time. And in my experience, they don't actually hinder the lift. I don't lose levels of lift, full stop, as in with it, without it, sorry, I could get her to a 10, and with it, I can only get her to a 9. I don't experience that personally, but what I do find is that it takes a bit longer to get there. If you have a different experience of that, I would love to hear it, and let's share it. Personally, in my experience, it's about being a little bit patient, and it will still get there, but potentially it will take a little bit more time. Now, what I would say is with bond builders, you still need to be really, really careful. So this is sometimes hard, I think, to explain to clients because maybe manufacturers have certain adverts out there that make them think that you stick in a bond build or whatever Plex or whatever it is, you stick that in and suddenly we can perform miracles. And of course we know that's not always possible or often possible. So the way I like to explain to them is like this. I have a couple of ways of thinking of it. This is my favourite for clients. Okay, when you go for a drive in the car, to protect yourself, you put on your seatbelt. However, wearing a seatbelt, although it makes you safer and better protected, you can still crash the car. And if you crash the car, you can still get hurt. Okay, so accidents can still happen. And hopefully that helps. Think of it like protection. Putting on your seatbelt, it can help to protect, but it doesn't mean that, you can't still crash the car. So hopefully that helps. Okay, right, I'm just going to pause for a second and have a little look at some questions and things that are coming through. So Sasha or Landini, what about if they have a lot of warmth naturally in their hair? Would you still go for 20 volt over 30 volt? A really, really good question, and I'm right about to talk about different pigmentation patterns. Because you're absolutely right, like a lot of warmth in the hair can make it harder to lift. Simon Townley, if you have enough holes in the hair to get to base 10, how do bond builders repair the hair and keep the holes for light? Oh my gosh, what a question. Okay, so I don't pretend that my area of expertise is in understanding the ways of bond builders, to be very honest with you. It's something that I would love to really understand more, and it's something thing that I've questioned a hell of a lot over the last few years, you know, since they started coming out, particularly when I was working for a manufacturer that launched one. And I found it really difficult to ever get concrete answers around exactly what it is they do. Now, I'm not saying that I wasn't given a good enough answer. It's quite possibly accurate to say that the actual explanation for it is just too complicated for it to be explained to me or to many others in my position, that it's, you know, literally super molecular science and it's quite difficult to explain. So it's not really, to be honest with you, a huge area of my expertise. But what was shared with me was that, so you know, they often say you have to go stronger with the peroxide to get the lift. You know, you have to go one stronger. Some say you do, some say you don't. I would always question, well, you know, just going up in the oxidant, is that, you know, you're not just kind of like neutralising out the good that you're doing by adding the bond builder in. You're not just like making it as bad by using the stronger peroxide. And it was told to me by a manufacturer that the good done from adding in the bond builder, like the benefits from that, far outweigh the negative results from going stronger in the peroxide. Okay, so I'll repeat that because that sounds might sound a bit confusing. So it was told to me, okay, this is not me saying, but it was explained to me by a manufacturer that the benefits from adding in a bond builder, if you need to go stronger with the peroxide, the benefits from adding it in are stronger than that of increasing, you know, the negative things that could come from increasing the oxidant. So who knows, okay? That's how it was explained to me, but there we go. And yes, Julie McEwen and Simon Townley, the holes in the hair are from removing the pigment, not the bonds. That is correct. Hopefully so anyway. Okay, so what are the other things that affect the lift? Hair texture, first of all. So the hair texture can affect lift. So, for example, different hair types. So take my very piddly, slightly pathetic, typical base 7 Caucasian hair type. It's fine hair. There's a fairly decent amount of it, I suppose, but I'd still say I'm fine to medium density. Now, it's not so much about density, actually, it's about the texture, about the thickness of each individual hair. Different individual hair textures, if they're thicker, they tend, like each hair, it tends to have more layers of cuticles, and that's one of the reasons why it is like physically thicker, is because it has much more layers of cuticles. So if you think about the journey of lifting, of lightening hair, the first step in that journey is to open the cuticles, yeah? The cuticles are the door to what's inside, which is the pigment, which is stuff we need to get out. But the first thing we have to do is open the cuticles. Different hair types, I mentioned earlier, my housemate of Chinese heritage, beautiful, each strand of hair is super, super thick. She will have probably triple the amount of cuticles on each hair that I have. Therefore, it's going to be harder to lift. It's going to take longer. You're going to need something stronger for sure, because there are more doors, as it were, to open. So that can certainly make a difference. On the flip side of that then, excuse me, for curly hair then, think of hair that's really curly, like an S shape. The cuticles are always already a little bit open because the shape of the hair is like an S, right? So the cuticles have to go around corners, okay, to sit around it. Therefore, they can never be completely closed. So the cuticles on super curly hair types are already a little bit open. Therefore, the step of opening them is so much easier. It's so much quicker because, you know, it's already, the job's already half done. So that would mean that it would lift more quickly a lot of the time. But unfortunately, what that also means is that although it lifts, it lightens more quickly, is that it can also dry out more quickly. So you have to be extremely careful. So with super curly hair, Afro and mixed heritage hair textures often lighten much more quickly than what you might expect. You might be lightening Afro hair and you look at it and you're like, oh, it's a base 3 or a 4. It's going to take forever to lift. I'll go in a bit more strong. And you're like, shit, it's lifting super quick. So that can be a little bit surprising, and the reason is because, or one of the reasons is because the cuticles are going around corners, they're already open, so it's easier for bleach to open them and get in there and lift. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Sorry. Okay, secondly then, pigmentation. Oh, I'm glad you've all got experience of that. That's really good to hear. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you, guys. Sometimes I feel like I just totally geek out, and potentially it's only me that gives a shit. So it's nice to know that it's not. Okay, pigmentation. So, in a nutshell, two different types of pigment in the hair: eomelanin and pheomelanin. The eomelanin is the one in the gosh, nothing's on the outside of the hair, but if you imagine the hair like different layers, the eomelanin is slightly outside. It's the one that you can see. Yeah, it's what's responsible for the depth of the hair. It's made up of blue, red, and yellow. And blue, red, and yellow mixed together, as we know, make brown. Okay, so then you have your pheomelanin, which is extra yellow underneath. Okay. So the reason I write, or I say, and I envision blue, red, and yellow in that order is because that's the order that the hair always lightens in. Remember, lightening is removing pigments. First the blue goes, then the red goes, then the yellow goes. Okay, and it goes in that order. So that makes sense when you think of visually the lightening curve. You never see the blue phase, right? Because when you have blue, you also have red and yellow. So the blue, red, and yellow are together, so it appears brown. So that's gone. It looks kind of browny. If you were to literally paint bleach on the hair and just watch it like super slow, it would appear brown before it started going reddy, and then it would start going orangey, and then obviously it goes at yellow. And a lot of the time it sticks at yellow, right? And a couple of reasons for that. One, because that's the last one to go, yeah, and quite often there's a higher amount of yellow in the hair. Like typically in the southeast of England, the amount of yellow in the hair is genetically higher. So that's one of the reasons a lot of the time if you're in the southeast. But also because not only do we have the eomelanin with the blue, red, and yellow, but we have the extra yellow in the hair because that's the colour of our pheomelanin a lot of the time as well. So something that's really, really important to bear in mind is that you should never actually try and lift hair past a very pale yellow. There should always be some yellow remaining in the hair, because the integral, like the hair structure, is actually pale yellow in colour. So, so those very last bits of pigment, yeah, we talked about it, like removing pigment, making holes. Those very last bits are pale yellow in colour. If you remove all of them completely, then think of them like the spine or the backbone of the hair. If you get rid of that, it's gone. It's floppy. It's no longer a hair. It disintegrates. But going back to somebody's question earlier about if there's more warmth in the hair, do you need a stronger peroxide? Yeah, you probably do. You don't definitely need it to be a stronger peroxide, but it doesn't need to be stronger, but it definitely needs to be longer. Bloody love it when it rhymes, don't you? It just makes you remember it a bit more. So if there's more warmth, doesn't necessarily need to be stronger, but it will definitely need to be on for longer. So I hope that helps. So other things that can affect lift are your application. So first of all, the thickness of your sections need to be extremely fine to get more lift. This is the same for scalp bleaching, for highlighting, for foliage, for whatever. The thinner the section, the more saturated the product is going to be, which means you'll get more lift. And a little way I like to remember it is that the thickness of your section should be thin enough that you could read a book through it. Okay, so you could read through the page through the thickness of your section, and that will get you the most lift. Top tips for scalp bleaching: I would always start at the back of the head so that you can wash it off if needs be. And also, whenever I've done a section, again, this is just for scalp bleaching, not for a full head of foils, I would go back through, I apply a quarter at a time, and then I would go back through that quarter and reapply it again as well, very, very carefully. A couple of reasons. One, to make sure that I haven't missed any bits, because look, we're all human, it happens. And secondly, has anyone ever seen that thing where the bleach looks like it's kind of running away from the head a little bit? I guess it's because it's swelling, right? But it looks like it's literally like running away from the scalp and just moving further down the hair. So it's just kind of getting a little bit more product and just pushing it back onto the scalp, just replacing it back on there to make sure that it's super saturated and that you can get that lift. And finally, development time as well. So I would throw this question out there to you actually about, what are the development times, that your manufacturer recommends to you, because it does vary. Read a book that's really thin then, yes. Development times do vary according to different manufacturers. Some will be less, some will be more. But, they're there as a guide. They're not there as gospel. For insurance purposes, actually, they're there as gospel, so do remember that. But it does, if it says it can be up to 50 minutes, for example, or 45 minutes or an hour, that doesn't mean that you have to leave it on for that amount of time. That might sound a bit silly, but I guess if there's anybody who's just kind of starting out and you're really relying on, how long do I leave it on for? Oh, it says up to 45 minutes. 45 minutes it is. Not always the case. Like, God, I'm in scalp bleach rehab at the moment, actually. I'm totally growing mine out. But when I was having my roots done, I mentioned I'm base 7, I've got a fine hair type, therefore not many layers of cuticles, light base. It lifts in like, well, the bit underneath, because it's got the rest of my hair sitting over it, doesn't need to be on for more than about 20 minutes. The part on the top, so it's exposed to more room temperature, probably needs to be on for about 35, 40 max. And that's with like 15 volumes, so 4.5%. So yeah, just being really wary of that. The other thing I wanted to talk about as well is the option to reapply if needs be. Now, the only time I would definitely not reapply, well, actually a couple of times I'd definitely not reapply. Obviously, if the condition can't take it, if the elasticity is too poor, hair type is too fine, too weak, etc. But also would never reapply bleach on the scalp. Like, if, for example, I know I just said I would reapply each section when I've done it, but I mean, I wouldn't like leave it on for 50 minutes and be like, cool, I'm going to mix up some more and put it straight back on a scalp. Like, that is a surefire way to get at least a sensitivity reaction. So I wouldn't do that. However, if you are doing, I don't know, like a foliage or something like that, like an off scalp technique, then you can reapply. If the condition lets you, always do your stretch test, always do your elasticity test to make sure that you're able to do that. But yeah, look, I hope that helps. The final thing, and a few people are throwing this out there, what about using heat? Great question. The other thing that will affect lift is the external temperature, how hot or how cold it is. So as we know, heat helps the development of colour. It speeds it up, it accelerates it. Bear in mind, it doesn't actually make it lighten more. Okay, the key word is in what I just said. It speeds it up, it accelerates it. So if you leave it on, you're still going to get the lift, okay? You just need to be patient. All of the lightening, the bleaching products that manufacturers are making in the UK are designed to be developed at room temperature, okay, unless stated otherwise. To my knowledge, anything I've ever worked with has been designed to be developed at room temperature. Therefore, the use of like heat or a roller ball or something is not generally needed. Occasionally, sometimes people might put like a plastic cap on there or something to retain the heat and to help it get more lift. It does work, so like heat does aid the development of colour for sure, the development of colour and also, the removal of colour as it is in bleaching. But what it also increases is the risk of sensitivity. So I know, for example, myself, I've got very sensitive skin. There's just no way I could have a cap on my scalp bleach while I was having my roots done. Like, my head would be on fire. I get a bit itchy from a DiRHS. So, yeah, for some clients it's not an option, but will it help with lift? Yeah, it will speed it up. The other good benefit to using a cap, potentially, like a plastic cap or something, is to make sure the product doesn't dry out. It keeps the moisture in, doesn't it? You see the cap kind of looking a bit wet inside. But yeah, again, look, you just need to be wary of, you risk increasing sensitivity if you choose to do that. If you are struggling with your bleach drying out, and that's why you're choosing to do that, I would encourage you to have a look at your application. Your application potentially is not thick enough, not laid on quite enough. you know, like I think everyone's quite familiar with a freehand what's what I'm looking for, balayage. With a freehand balayage application, how that product, how the bleach on the hair then looks like heavy, like icing almost. It's not quite that for a scalp bleach, but it's not far off, to be honest with you. Like, you need to really lay it on thick to be able to get the most amount of lift, but also to stop it from drying out. On the flip side of that, because there always is one, if you really lay on too much product, then you risk, you can, manufacturers will call it like when you suffocate the scalp a little bit. Basically, it's too heavy an application and you increase the risk of sensitivity again. So just be wary of that as well. What's Gemma Farquhar saying? Anneliese Hesse, you need to try Magic Light Master with oil additives. I would absolutely love to try that. I've never heard of it. Would you do 2 scalp bleach sessions in one day if someone wanted to be dramatically lighter? Oh, what a good question, Claire Jones. Me personally, no. This is the short answer. Look, it all comes down to, manufacturers will probably tell you no, but I think it all comes down to the sensitivity of the scalp skin of that person. Bear in mind, even if somebody doesn't say they have sensitive skin, the skin on the scalp is extremely thin in texture and therefore extremely sensitive. So I would be very, very wary about doing 2 scalp bleaches in one day. It's not me saying that the answer is no. Me personally, probably wouldn't do it. Okay, right, moving on. We're nearly there, guys. How can I make it look as light as possible? The question we all would like an answer to. So, first of all, 2 things. Lighten to a very pale yellow. So my first piece of advice would be to make sure that you've actually lightened to the level that you're aiming to lighten to. So someone mentioned earlier when we were talking about the different colour, like a blue powder bleach and a white powder bleach. And somebody, sorry, I don't remember who it was now, somebody said, I like to use the white bleach because I can tell more the colour that it's lifted to versus the blue one. And I totally agree with you on that, actually. It wouldn't make my decision about which product I use, but I you're totally onto something. I think it's something to be very careful of and very, very mindful of. But even the white ones, to be honest, the colour that you're going for when you're lifting hair, a lot of the time is white, right? Again, obviously not actually lifting it to white, but you're trying to get it as light as possible. You're trying to remove the yellow. So the blue powder makes it look a bit less yellow, but the white powder makes it look whiter as well. So I guess my main piece of advice would just be to check your level of lift. So gently scrape some of the bleach off of the hair, extra gently if it's on the scalp because you don't want to increase irritation, but gently scrape some of the product off so that you can see the actual colour it's lifted to and not be deceived by the colour of the product sitting on the top of it. The amount of times when I've been lightening someone's hair that I have checked my foils, or my bleach, whatever, I've had a look and gone, oh yes, it looks like it's lifted really nice, it's a 10 or it's a 9 or it's where I want it to be, I'm going to wash it off, and then you rinse it and you're like, fuck, it's yellow. It's 2 levels darker than what it looked when it was on. A couple of reasons for that. Obviously, it always looks heavier when it's wet. Also, when the hair clumps together, it looks heavier, denser, darker. Yeah. A lot of the time, it is just the colour of the products that's deceiving us. So just be really, really wary and make sure it is actually lightened the level that you hope it is. Number 2, top tip would be with your toning. Bye, Carolyn Chapman, thank you. Toning. Basically, if you want it to look as light as possible, it can't go ash. Okay, I'm really, really sorry. But ash, visually, is a dark looking colour. Okay, so picture me this. Picture you go into, a DIY store, okay, and they have those paint swatches, like the pieces of cardboard with all the different yellows and all the different blues on. And you pick the one with the yellow and you pick the one with the blue and you put them side by side. You look at the lightest level of yellow and the lightest level of blue. Okay, so technically they're the same amount of pigment, yeah, let's say. However, which one looks darker? The blue. Okay, because blue, ash, is a dark colour visually. Ash absorbs the light, therefore it looks darker. Yellow reflects the light and makes it look lighter. So a question I'll always ask clients when I'm lightening, which is, to be honest, all the time, because all I do is bleach hair, my clients, would be, is your priority being lighter and brighter, or cooler and darker? Okay. Is their priority being lighter and brighter, or cooler and darker? And 9 times out of 10, they will say, I want to be lighter and cooler. Okay. And unfortunately, as we just said, it doesn't work that way. So they need to choose what their priority is. If their priority is being cooler, visually it will appear a little darker because the ash will drop the appearance of it visually. If their priority is looking as light as possible, then I would tone them at the coolest to a pure or a neutral blonde. Now, I did a post about this on my Instagram just the other day. So if you want to pop on there afterwards to get an idea, like visually, what I mean about this, then please do. But, you know, I guess to describe it would be like that kind of like that Scandi, that sort of Swedish blonde. So it's very clean, like a baby blonde, but it's not ash. Okay, it doesn't have to be yellow. Some clients might go, you know, it's yellow. But to be honest, for some clients, you're going to tone it ash grey and they're going to go, it's still yellow. You know, it's the way of the world. But if they want it to look as light as possible, then you need to get it more to neutral or a pure blonde. Some formula examples of that would be predominantly just like a clean or a clear base, so like a level 9 or a level 10, and then just adding a small amount of mauve ash, or potentially a tiny amount of blue or grey ash as well, but usually it's just like a base, like a 9 or a 10, with a very small amount of the neutralising tone that you need, just to neutralise the yellow, but not to deposit the ash. Yeah, so it keeps it as light looking as possible. Okay, I hope that helps. Finally, and we are at the end of the lesson, guys, some bleach myths that I would like to bust with you. So here we go. As I said earlier, it's never a yes or a no for me. It's about understanding the reasons why. So I'm going to try and stand by that as much as possible now also. Myth number 1. If I use a bond builder, I'll be able to get more lift. What do we think about that? So, I mean, I guess a lot of people would straight away just say, no, that's not true. And I'd be inclined to agree with you to quite a large extent, in that literally adding in a bond builder will not make your product stronger. That's absolutely true. However, it could potentially mean that you're able, because the bond builder is protecting the structure in the bonds, literally the structure of the hair, potentially you're able to leave it on for a little bit longer, and so you can achieve a little bit more lift. You know, like all these myths, remember, they do stem from somewhere. So whilst I think it's easy to kind of laugh a bit and go, oh, that's ridiculous, that's obviously not correct, it's also important to consider, like, where have they come from, the reasons behind that. So, you know, sometimes there is something to it. I guess the piece of advice, the thing that I would remember for this is just personal opinion as well. I'm cautious of, like, if I wasn't going to push it that far without a bond builder, do I want to do that? Do I want to do it with, basically? Like, do I want to take that risk just because I've got that in there? And I would go back to the car analogy, that just because you're putting on a seatbelt doesn't mean that you can't still have a crash. So be bloody careful. And don't let manufacturers' ads campaigns fool you, because I've seen some out there, you know, going from like copper red to white blonde, and it's like, use this and you get this, and we all just know that it's not true. So, next one, bleach stops developing after a certain amount of time. Again, I'm not giving a yes or a no answer, it's about understanding the why behind it. As we said earlier, it's at its most powerful for around 20 to 30 minutes, and then it slows down. You know, and over time it slows down a lot. So I'll ask you this question. Have you done a strand test for a client, forgotten about it, and left it overnight? I have. You come back in the morning, it's blonde. Yeah, it's really blonde, but it's also dust. So that just goes to show that it does not stop developing after a certain amount of time, but it will slow down. Number 3, it's better to reapply rather than rinse and apply again from scratch. Couple of things for this then. Every time you reapply bleach, so let's say so let's give it a scenario. You lighten someone's hair, it's not lifted enough, so you rinse it off, dry it, mix that fresh and do it again. Every time you put more product on, you're reopening the cuticle. You're going through that process again. That action is taking place again, which is a damaging action to the hair. Okay, there's no way around that. It is a damaging action to the hair. But also you have to question, is it better for what? Okay, so the alternative is to not to rinse it off, is to just maybe like scrape off the excess product that's on there and reapply more product over the top. Definitely wouldn't do that on someone's scalp, but we're talking about in packets or something potentially. It could be less damaging because at least you're not kind of drying it off, rinsing it off, closing the cuticle, and then ripping it back open again with fresh product. You're keeping it open, so arguably it could be less of a damaging action. But again, you have to question, is it better? What are you saying it's better for? Because that's definitely not going to be better. If we talk about sensitivity, then potentially it's better to rinse it off, dry it, and do it again another day. So I would question kind of what's the main objective from there. And finally, guys, this is my all-time favourite. I grew up being told this. If you're a good enough colourist, you shouldn't need to tone. Oh my god. So the salon I trained in, I first trained in, the manager, who obviously was in charge of budgets and stock and everything, was not a colourist. I know, I don't blame her for this because she wasn't a colourist, she wasn't to know, yeah. But she always used to say this: if you're a good enough colourist, you shouldn't need to tone. Okay, so if somebody wants an ash result in their hair, there is no way of achieving that except to put it in artificially, which is toning. Nobody has, when you lighten hair, the only thing that comes out is warmth. Ash never comes out, okay? Ash never gets shown. No one has ash naturally present in their hair. So the only way of achieving it visually is by putting it in. Before you put it in, you take out the pigment and then you have to put it in. That is the only way of achieving it. So let's bust the myth. If you're a good enough colourist, you won't need to tone. If you want a warm or potentially neutral result, then potentially you won't need to tone. But if you want anything outside of that, or if you want a warm tone that isn't in the hair, so for example, you want like a peach but on a level 9, then obviously to lift to a 9, you're removing the copper, but then you need to put the copper back in. Yeah, does that make sense? So it's not even about just creating ash. Yeah, basically that was bollocks. So there we go. Sorry. And that's it, guys. So I've done a really, really long, techie, geeky rant for you there. Honestly, I can't believe people are still listening. It was so much longer than I meant it to be, which is the story behind all of my presentations that I have ever done. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you really enjoyed it. If anybody has any burning questions, I will hold on just for another minute to allow for the delay. But look, it's the evening and it's dinner time, and I reckon it's also wine o'clock, guys. So go ahead and have a lovely evening. And any other messages or any other questions, that you think of, please feel free to drop me a DM. My Instagram is just my first name _ my second name, so you can find me super easily. Drop me a DM. I love a good geeky chat, and we can pick up the conversation from there. So guys, thank you ever so much. There I am again. Thank you ever so much, and have a lovely evening. Bye.